we inevitably in pastoral ministry get criticism, and we get all sorts of feedback, and or there's like unmet expectations that people have, or whatever. I will say Inspire generally, I'm looking at the camera right now, there we go. Inspire, you're amazing. It's the least amount of criticism that I've gotten in a church, and I'm really thankful for that. So I just want to offer that. But how do you handle like criticism and unmet expectations? Are you good at it? You feel like you'd be good at it.
Enneagram 8.
Yeah, you're great at it, aren't you? You just don't care, do you?
No, well, I shouldn't say that.
You're a nice Enneagram 8.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's being the youngest of 3 children and being raised to be fiercely independent, or if it's because I'm an Enneagram 8. But I'd say the majority of the time when I get criticism, like I take it with a really big grain of salt. And also like for me, one of the things that I just absolutely believe is that if I would not take advice from that person, I'm not going to take their criticism.
Oh, interesting.
And so like,
you don't even take like a partial truth of the criticism.
If like I sit with things, regardless of who it comes from. And so like I might, like it really just depends on what it is. But if someone is giving like really harsh feedback, and they are not someone that I would go to for advice, I'm probably not going to spend hours mourning over the fact that they didn't like the way that I did my sermon that week, or like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's actually kind of freeing.
And so,
you want to speak that into me?
So,
speak that over me, please.
Like, I think but also I'm not a words of affirmation person, right? Like, that's my lowest love language.
So you don't need it to feel loved.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like,
I'm desperate for it to feel loved.
I'm so sorry.
It's so hard for me.
But like, I'll put it this way, but like we've had conversations about areas where I need to grow, and like I sit with that, and I might in the moment, because I'm an Enneagram 8, rebuff it, and then I'll sit with it for a month and be like, he's probably right. But like if it's just like a random person, especially if I don't know their name, if I don't know their name and they're like, that really sucked, I'm gonna be like, welcome to Inspire Church, welcome to
Inspire Church.
I'm sorry you feel that way. But also I think one of the things that I just truly believe is that, and also coming from my residency experience, which was at a multi-ethnic, multilingual church, is I'm deeply passionate about the belief that church is not supposed to be about your preferences.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
It's supposed to be about your growth. So if person A really didn't like the way that I did something or the way an event ran, I can rest in the fact that it was exactly what person C needed that day.
Yeah, sure.
And so like, regardless of where the feedback comes from, because some people are like, man, I really didn't like let's take the Christmas series that we just did, right? So we did Awkward Family Christmas, and we approached Christmas very differently. Instead of like the traditional Advent-y, like Jesus was born in Bethlehem, here's the journey that he took to get here, we took a very different approach. Some people loved that, like loved that we approached it differently. And it was such a place for people to find something new in the Christmas season. And then like I also got feedback that they didn't like how I did my sermon on the 22nd, because they wanted the traditional Christmas message. And so like I can take that and be like, okay, I like, your feelings are valid. Your opinion is valid, but that I don't need to sit and hold with the fact that you didn't like my sermon. I can sit in the space and just be like, we did it for a purpose, and I know that there's other people who have loved it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So with the criticism, like I try not to sit with it. If something sits with me for a while, I'll usually circle back and have a follow-up conversation.
I will overthink feedback so much. Like it'll like, it drags in. It could, and depending on the kind of feedback that it is, I mean, it sits heavy for me. And actually, ironically, you were talking about giving feedback to you, like as a staff member. Part of it is that I'm learning, you actually need that feedback, right? Like
yes.
you'll actually, like Matt Stitz the same way. And I've struggled to give Matt, feedback from this role, because I also know what it's like to receive the criticism. And so there's a part of me that struggles to actually give the criticism. And we've talked about this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be the person who, go.
Constructive.
Yeah, sure.
Criticism.
There's a difference. Yeah.
Constructive.
Yeah, that's fair.
That I live for.
And when someone's giving you that who actually knows you, it is different than someone who just is listening to you speak and, has a point of contention with a point of your sermon or whatever. Like someone who I'd never met before. I've seen them one time, and I've never seen them come back or whatever, was like, I'm really upset at how little scripture you use. And I thought to myself, it's like, there's some sermons where I feel like it's all I talk about. like if you look at the totality of like 2 years of sermons, it's like there's tons of scripture in sermons, and so it's different if somebody knows you versus if they just kind of hear you speak once or whatever. I handle criticism by like weeping and hiding. There's probably maybe some gnashing of teeth in there. I don't know. Oh man, I am like naturally just a people pleaser, and I've had some people speak into my life recently about how people-pleasing pastors are actually it's actually a detriment to the church at large when you're a people-pleasing pastor. And that because what ends up happening is you become a peacekeeper and not a peacemaker, right? And so we're not called to peacekeeping. We're called to peacemaking.
Yeah.
And so that's been a big deal. Part of what has been helpful for me in helping understand this is that I watch a lot of people with ADHD talk about tips and like feedback and stuff, because I'm pretty open about the fact that I have ADHD, and I feel like everybody has ADHD these days. I don't know. It's like an available condition for everyone, and they all are like, I have ADHD. I'm like, no, you got distracted once. You don't wake up and be crippled by the 100 things that you need to do and sit and feel guilty for not doing anything. And then also subsequently get 40 hours of work done in 3 hours sometimes. Like I'm severely ADHD. And I heard this statistic, this is wild, that, for those who grow up and have ADHD, you are given, on average, 20,000 more pieces of criticism than the average child growing up by the time you're 18 years old. And so I grew up with all sorts of feedback about like school and education. I mean, I barely passed high school, barely got through my undergrad. I smoked grad school, which is funny. It's funny how that happens, because it was so hard, right, comparatively. But like the amount of people who just were like, well, you're lazy, or, you don't study, or, blame you for things, forgetting things, like not being able to prioritize, kind of, all sorts of different things like that. That's been really hard. So like I have learned, okay, well, the reason why I'm probably feeling that anxiety from criticism is actually just because I've gone through a lot of it when and now I'm just like almost it's like a fear of mine. And it's not that people shouldn't give me criticism, because that's my own insecurities, but I also talk about how pastoring brings out all the insecurities in your life. I mean, it's really, really tough. And the last thing maybe that I'd say about this is that I'm realizing that for people who have criticism, I'm realizing that it actually often comes from a place of woundedness in themselves. Yeah. And that has actually given me a lot more empathy toward people like, oh, that really hurt you, but that hurt you or you were upset by that because if that was something that was undealt with for you when you were like 25 or when you were 13 or when you were 6, like there, and that wasn't really dealt with. And so now you're projecting that onto me. And so I'm learning after 20 years of pastoral ministry and just being terrified of feedback, negative feedback or whatever, that no, it's actually just really woundedness in someone and they don't know where to take it. And we often become the brunt of people's unhealth maybe sometimes. And so, that's kind of where I would navigate. That's how I'm navigating criticism these days.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.